Santorini through the beautiful pictures of the white traditional villages and the beautiful sunsets. Not many people know that Santorini has played one of the most significant roles in the entire Greek history. The first recorded human settlements appear on this island more than 7,000 years ago. I'm talking about the Neolithic age, more than 5,000 years before Christ. A small group of people who came from the northern side of Africa and from the east, settling here, food gatherers, a little bit of hunting, surviving day by day. Life was not that pleasant. About 4,000 years before Christ, we have a very, very large volcanic eruption which splits the island of Santorini almost in half. As I told you earlier, up until those days the island was completely circular and everything in the middle used to be land. After that eruption, the middle point of Santorini sinks underwater and the gap between Thirasia and the southwest point of the island is created. Up until those days, Ia, the northwest point, was still connected to Thirasia, and later eruption will separate them as well. 2,500 years before Christ, starting from Crete, which is about 63 nautical miles to the south from here, arrives to this island one of the most unique, advanced and sophisticated civilizations that this earth has ever seen. I'm talking about the Minoan civilization. During those ages, Crete was their capital and probably one of the most innovative cities in the entire earth. The place that gave us the famous palace of Knossos and the legend of the Minotaur and the maze. Santorini follows next. By 2,000 years before Christ, they have already built their first cities, not settlements, not villages, entire cities, and the island was thriving. It had more than 35,000 people living here, whereas right now we do not exceed 20,000. Throughout these times, their capital and their cultural center was located where Akrotiri is today, on the exact opposite point from where we are right now, and their city was taken from a marvel. Remember, we're talking about 2,000 years before Christ, and they already had 3- and 4-story buildings, irrigation systems, a sewage system long before the Romans, water closets on the second floor of their houses, and they even had hot running water coming with double plate pipes from the hot springs of the volcano inside their city. I'm not making these things up. Amazing artists, some of their frescoes, their wall paintings survive up until today, preserved thanks to the ashes of the eruption. And from the intensity of the color, we know they had an amazing knowledge of color pigments, especially their very famous blue and red shades. A few of these frescoes that survive give us a small idea of their everyday life and a glimpse of their culture. One of the most famous ones depicts a man holding fishes alongside blue dolphins and in front of the very, very advanced sailing ships, showcasing they were a seafaring civilization. Fishing and sailing was a daily habit for them. The second fresco depicts two beautiful young brunette ladies holding saffron seeds and flowers in their hands and bathed in red colors. This is a metaphor, an allegory. It also showcases the fertility and the feminine side of the earth. Due to the volcanic nature of the island, their entire lives were based on agriculture. Very good using clay and bronze, amazing sculptors, and the best products was textiles. They were very famous weavers. Throughout these ages, the island of Santorini had the name Strogili. Strogili means circular, exactly to commemorate the shape of the old island before the volcanic eruption took place. Throughout these times, Strogili or Santorini was one of the most significant ports of the entire Aegean Sea. Being on the southest point of it, all the ships that sailed from Africa and from the east would stop here to trade and refuel to continue their journey, thus making Santorini a center of cultural exchange and very, very important merchant business. They were living in very blessed and abundant times, educated, wealthy, land and sea were very rich, and through trading they would have whatever they lacked, until the day the volcano decides no more. Somewhere around the 16th century before Christ, we have the volcanic eruption, which according to historians is the worst volcanic eruption of the last 10,000 years, so in almost the entire human history. On that day, as soon as the volcano erupts, lava, pumice and debris gets thrown into the sky more than 2,000 kilometers. That is the stratosphere of the earth. It's more than 1,200 miles. There's a very thick cloud formed from the eruption and the burnt matter, which was so dense that the light of the sun could not pass through. For about 2 weeks, they must have had complete darkness. Along with the eruption, millions of volcanic stones get scattered all over the island. Every black stone you see today in Santorini, either it's on the floor or part of a wall, is a piece of that volcano and makes part of that eruption. As soon as the eruption finishes, the volcano crumbles into itself, submerges underwater, creating a huge tsunami. Some scientists say waves higher of 50 meters, which reach all the way up until the northern coasts of Crete, devastating the majority of the villages there and technically signifying the end of the Minoan civilization. The island of Santorini remains uninhabited for more than 200 years after the eruption. A lot of earthquakes follow, small eruptions, toxic gases, but the main problem of the island were the ashes. The island was completely submerged under million of ash. There were more than 60 cubical kilometers of ash falling onto the island. Just to try and make that an image, it's like all the houses of today's Japan falling onto the island of Santorini. So technically no land will be cultivated or farmed, hence no people would live here. Ironically, these ashes in the future will provide one of the most fertile soils in the entire world, which reach all the way up until our generations and the generations to come. Small break, this was an example why you should never rent an ATV in Santorini or the Greek islands. This volcanic eruption was such a major event that the climate of the entire Earth changed. Santorini had winter for almost 3 years, and this is an event mentioned in texts of ancient Egyptians and Chinese as the years without summer. Somewhere in the late 1950s and the 60s, they were building the Canal of Suez. On their effort to find a material which was water resistant and light, they came up with pumice, which is abundant on this island. And on their effort to extract pumice from Santorini in 1967, under the compressed ashes, they found the ruins of the ancient Minoan city, where Akrotiri is today, and the archaeological site is still found. Archaeologists make a few strange discoveries. The first strange thing which they found was the fact that their main city and capital of the island in Akrotiri did not have any walls surrounding or protecting it, neither they found any weaponry or shields. Two theories came out. The first theory states that there were very peaceful times, which I believe is nonsense, as Greeks love to fight and everybody knows that. The second theory states that the sailing skills and ships were so ahead of the time, no one would dare to come and fight them. They were more advanced than any civilization around this area, and they were ruling these lands with ease. The second strange discovery was the fact that there were no human remainings on the island. There was clear evidence of a very, very advanced civilization ruling this place for centuries, no humans to back it up. The most concrete theory states that probably before the volcanic eruption there must have been a large earthquake. Most of the people must have fled towards the ships and away from the shores to protect themselves, and the volcanic eruption must have found them in the middle of the sea along with the tsunami, engulfing them and vanishing them. Obviously, there are theories such as the one that they were so advanced they could predict the volcanic eruption and they left about a century before it. However, unfortunately, I cannot confirm those. About 250 years after the eruption arrives the first civilization which lived here after the event, which is the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians are the fathers of the Phoenician alphabet, which technically gave birth to the Greek alphabet. The Minoans before them used to use an ideogram vocabulary such as Arabic, which we later named Linear A and B, considered the first alphabet of Europe and in a big part still untranslated up until today. The Phoenicians remain here for approximately 5 generations, and they're the ones who gave the name Kallisti to Santorini. Kallisti means the most beautiful due to the new morphology of the ground and the views we enjoy up until today. Somewhere between the 9th and 8th century before Christ arrived to this island the second most important civilization that ever lived here, and technically the ancestors of today's Santorinians. I am talking about the Dorians. The Dorians are one of the 4 main ancient Hellenic tribes, along with the Ionians, Aeolians, and the Achaeans. From these 4 tribes, every Greek human being that has and will ever exist comes from. The Dorians are also ancestors of the Spartans, so if you ask any local, they will tell you the descendant of the Spartans. In a way true, but practically it's not. The Dorians arrived here before becoming the famous war nation that everybody knows as Sparta. At the time, we used to name them Lacedaemoni. That's why if any one of you has seen or will see the movie 300, you might notice that the shields of the Spartans have on them the Greek letter L, which is like an upside down Latin V, exactly to commemorate their heritage for them. However, if you meet any locals today and they're telling you they're Spartans, please agree with them, they'll be very offended. The Dorians remained here for almost 1,000 years. They're the ones who gave the name Thira, Thira. Thira is the official name of this island up until today. You will never see the name Santorini written in an official piece of paper. The name Thira comes from the name of the Dorian king Piraeus or Thiras. He was the one who brought his people here, fell in love with the island, and created this beautiful civilization which lasted almost a millennium, leaving a huge cultural heritage for this place. In fact, the Dorians are the only ones who tried to expand their culture in other parts of the world, where they even reached all the way up until Africa, creating the city of Cyrene, what we call Kyrene, and its modern days Libya. After the Dorians, many civilizations passed from here, none of them really affecting the island except from one. Most of them are conquerors who place their flag, collect their taxes, and let the people be. Very quickly, throughout the Roman Empire, the island belongs to them. Around the 4th century after Christ, the East Roman Empire becomes Byzantium, and Santorini follows their reign. Technically, it's still the Roman Empire under a different flag and emperor. And then approximately the 1200, the Venetian royal family takes this island as a feud, and they rule for almost 300 years. The Venetians are the only ones who affect this island in two major ways. First of all, they're the ones who gave the name Santorini to the island. When the Italians were here on the south port of Perissa, they had built a Catholic church which at the time was the cathedral of the island, the ruins of which we found in the 17th century. That church was dedicated to Santa Irene. Saint Irene. Santorini comes out and sticks to the island. Ironically, the name Irene is Greek and means peace. The second way which they affected the island is the architecture of the very old villages. As I told you earlier, throughout their time, the main problem were the pirates' attacks. So they created an architectural plan which was meant to destroy the navigation of someone who comes here for the first time, but also have the element of surprise in their advantage. Which means, if any one of you ever visits the oldest of the Santorinian villages, the village of Emborio, the south side, almost 900 years old, you'll see a few patterns repeating themselves. The first thing you might notice is the fact that the alleys of the village were designed not wide enough to allow two men holding shields to stand next to each other. Only one man with a shield could pass each time, so no matter the amount of pirates, they will always face them one by one to have higher chances of winning the fight. The alleys of the village were designed not wide enough to allow horses to run through it. Only donkeys could pass, which are smaller and slower, to prevent this very strong force to come through the territory. The alleys of the village come in circles, many times behaving like a maze, bringing you in front of dead ends and walls to be able to surprise them and attack them from different points. And lastly, the first row of houses was always built in a straight line, no gaps between them, and the entrance of the homes facing the back side of the building, so during the invasions they could use them as fortified walls. This is such a good of a plan. I will take you fast forward to 2014. The van of Google Earth comes here to do the mapping of the island. If any one of you today goes to Emborio or some of the very old villages and turns on the Google Maps, they don't actually work. They will take you in front of dead ends and walls just to demonstrate how something built almost 700 years ago with the sole purpose to confuse people still succeeds today with our technology, which I find pretty awesome. All of this until 1453. The Ottoman Empire conquers Constantinople, which at the time was the capital of Byzantium in Turkey, what today we call Istanbul, and the rest of the Byzantine Empire slowly follows. Santorini becomes part of the reign in the early 1500s and remains for more than 300 years. In 1821, the Greek liberation begins. Santorini gets liberated by 1836, becomes part of the Greek kingdom by the late 19th century, and eventually part of the Hellenic Republic in the early 1900s, remains in Greek hands up until today, with the exception of about a year and a half when the Germans occupied the island during the Second World War. That was a very, very short version of the history of this island. Questions? Anyone? Someone?
Question.
Yes.
Can you explain us that whole, that little eye that was on all the souvenirs?
The eye. So the blue eye. We call it the evil eye. To be honest, it's a pagan symbol. It comes from the very, very old times of ancient Greece. It's something that you can find in the coast of Turkey and even in the northern side of Africa. So in Greece, they believe that someone can transmute you bad energy by talking bad about you or saying bad things about you, which usually translates to migraine and exhaustion, which ironically it does take place. So the evil eye is there to protect you from that. Usually people wear it, or they put it in if they buy a new home or a new car to protect it from the bad words of the people. Now it gets funnier now. The reason the eye is blue is because according to the legend, people with blue eyes and people born on Saturdays cannot catch this bad vibe. And it's a very funny story. I'll tell you why. Because even the church, the Orthodox Church, accept this thing, meaning that when we get this feeling that someone has given us the bad eye, which means migraine or exhaustion, almost every Greek calls his grandma. The grandma takes a little glass of water and oil, don't ask me why, I don't know, and makes a few prayers for you. Then she calls you back and she tells you, shake yourself and carry on. I swear to you, every time it works. I'm not joking. I have no reason, no intention to make a joke about it. It works. I don't know how, but it works.
So that's why. All in your head.
So, in a few minutes we'll do a small circle. Right there where you see the other buses, this is where our car will stop. This is where we'll meet again when that free